Though the forces of Azeroth had made great strides in their fight against the Legion, Gul'dan still had the advantage. The Warlock could head into the ancient Night Elven fortress Blackrook Hold in order to finish preparing Illidan's body for hosting Sargeras. Now, the Hold had stood for thousands of years, and so it contained its fair share of spirits. The perfect fuel for Gul'dan to do a ritual in order to rip the last remnants of Illidan's soul from his body. But Gul'dan's spell magic inadvertently reawakened a bunch of lost souls within the Hold, forcing them to relive their final moments during the War of the Ancients. These ghosts could not tell friend from foe, so they just started attacking anyone indiscriminately. The nearby settlement of Bradensbrook suffered for this, so they alerted the Alliance and Horde and requested aid. The champions lent their efforts to repelling the dead, soon discovering that Mai of Shadowsong had been taken capture. After rescuing her, the heroes head inside the Hold and did that dungeon, but they were too late. The Warlock had finished his ritual and buggered off with Illidan's body. So, that bad news was reported back to Dalaran, and Khadgar immediately tried to come up with a worst-case scenario contingency. If the Legion were indeed successful in bringing an avatar of Sargeras to Azeroth, what were their options? Luckily for him, the answer then literally fell out of the sky. A mysterious light-bound object, radiating a ridiculous amount of holy energy, came crashing down, landing just outside Soromar. And even though Khadgar had absolutely no idea what it was, he figured it would probably be useful, so he sent some players to go and get it. Once the artifact was retrieved, Khadgar began to fiddle with it, and in doing so, triggered a message left by an old friend, Turalyon, who had not been seen since the end of the Beyond the Dark Portal Warcraft 2 stuff. Turalyon's message said that its recipient needed to find the Prophet, noting that this represented the last hope of the Army of the Light. So, players head on out, with the artifact in tow. Destination, the Exodar, the Draenei capital, seeking Prophet Velen. However, they arrived to find the Exodar under attack from the Legion, with the demons being led by a fallen Eridar called Rakish. He and his army had apparently also seen the Lightbound artifact crash, and, unlike us, they knew what it was, so that's why they were there. Rakish and his army had already made their way inside the Dimensional Fortress, past the Exodar's outer defences, intent on destroying both the Draenei and the Naru, Oros. Champions fought their way through the demons, making it to the innermost chamber, the Vault of Lights, and there they found Velen, who immediately identified the artifact as Light's Heart, the sentience core of the Prime Naru Zera. Velen advised the champions that in order to unlock its secrets, they needed to bring the artifact before Oros, who was currently down an extremely long and stupid ramp. Unfortunately, after descending the ridiculously long ramp and entering the seat of the Naru, they found Rakish, who had already critically wounded Oros. Velen attempted to heal it, but that didn't work. Rakish intervened, and Oros died. Both Velen and the champions then got to fighting, putting Rakish on the defensive, but once the High General of the Demons' health got low enough, Velen suddenly started begging the heroes to stop hitting the guy, for he'd had a revelation. However, the champions just carried on hitting the bloke anyway because he wasn't going to stop hitting us, Velen. Velen rushed to the villain's side as he died, revealing that Rakish was actually his son, a son he had lost millennia ago, when Sargeras and the Legion had taken control of its homeworld. In fact, Velen had actually witnessed this moment play out in a vision way back when his son was born, but had no idea what he was looking at back then, so I guess he just forgot about it. Things then went really awkwardly silent, so the champions went ahead and hearthed back to Dalaran, but if you just so happened to cancel that, you would have got a little sneaky clue as to where the Legion expansion was ultimately heading, with Velen outright saying, "We're going to Argus, boys!" So that was cool. Good reason to maybe pay attention to some of those stay a while and listen type things every now and then. But anyway, the champions brought word of what happened back to Khadgar. With Oros gone, they were going to need to find some other way to access the knowledge within Light's Heart. Khadgar got to work, scouring the archives of Dalaran, eventually finding a text which stated that Zera and Elune may have shared some celestial connection. So, he used the Tears of Elune to unlock the artifact. And that worked. As soon as Light's Heart's powers were unlocked, the champion's consciousness was projected to Zera's location, to the crucible of all creation, in the Great Dark Beyond. And it was at this point that the Prime Naru Zera revealed the truth about the Titans, that they had fallen long ago in battle against Sargeras. She also mentioned that countless survivors of worlds ravaged by the Legion had come together under one banner to form an army of the light, and even now they were making their last stand on the remains of Argus. Should the army fall, the Legion would relaunch its burning crusade, putting even more worlds in their sights. To win this cosmic war, they were going to need to find Illidan's Stormrage, for it was he who was destined to end the Age of Demons. Now there's a page and a half about the 1,000 Years of War story by Robert Brooks here. You can watch the entire audiobook narrated by Stephen Pacey for free, so I'll put a link in the description for that. At the end of the Beyond the Dark Portal story, the Sons of Lothar were forced to cheese it through random portals, as Draenor itself became unstable. As far as the people of Azeroth were concerned, none of the Sons of Lothar survived that destruction, which is why there's a bunch of statues as you enter Stormwind for each of them, because they were presumed dead. But Khadgar's portal led to just a different place on Outland, and he remained there right up until the Dark Portal reopened for the Burning Crusade expansion, whilst Illyria and Turalyon ended up in the Twisting Nether, where they were rescued by the Army of the Light, an army led by Zira, the Prime Naru, and High Commander Lothraxion, a light-infused Nathrazim as well. Zira and Lothraxion had actually chosen Turalyon and Illyria to join their endless fight, for they had foreseen a destiny of the two heroes. They would discover an Emerald Star, which could put a stop to the Legion once and for all. Turalyon and Illyria didn't need all that much convincing, because their son Arator still lived on Azeroth. So saving the universe basically meant saving him. Turalyon swore fealty to the light, ascending into an immortal light-forged body, but Illyria's path went in a different direction. During a raid on a Legion prison, Illyria ended up infused with void energy. This power granted her visions, so she became determined to learn more about this strange force. But Zira did not like that one bit. The void directly opposes the light. So, the Naru outright forbade Illyria from exploring that power any further. Sometime later, Illyria and Turalyon were dispatched on a mission to Argus, but fell victim to an endless swarm of demons. Their odds of survival did not look good, so Illyria desperately called upon the Void to open a portal for them to escape, with Turalyon's light-forged body burning in agony as she pulled him through. On the other side of that wonderful experience, Illyria told her husband to return to Zira and Lothraxion, while she buggered off, leaving through another portal to learn more about the Void powers blossoming within her. Illyria's search eventually landed her in a Legion prison, where she met an ethereal known as the Locust Walker, a bloke who had mastered the powers of the Void. Locust Walker taught Illyria a whole bunch of stuff about the relationship between light and void, including a method to maintain one's sanity in its maddening emptiness. He explained that neither light nor void held every answer, and that her destiny, or the destiny of all things, lay somewhere in between. After all of that, Illyria returned to her husband and the Army of the Light, but Zira deemed her too much of a risk to continue among their ranks, ultimately imprisoning her. The Army of the Light then continued their desperate fight, not really doing very well, and as their situation grew ever more dire, Turalyon recorded his little message in the Light's Heart artifact and sent it off, hoping it would make its way to the people of Azeroth, which it did. But quite a lot of time had passed, relatively. For Azeroth, it had been a few decades since the Sons of Lothar had disappeared, but for Turalyon and Illyria, it had been millennia. So that's that part done. What's next? The soul of the Demon Hunter. Time was running out for the heroes of Azeroth. Pretty soon, Gul'dan was going to summon the soul of Sargeras and put it into Illidan's body. So, a counterplan was hatched. We would get Illidan's soul and put that into his body first. Lucky for us, the Demon Hunters knew where their master's soul was. Gul'dan had struck a bargain with Helya to guard his soul in Helheim. And although members of the Horde and Alliance had already been to Helheim once, getting to Helya again wasn't going to be so straightforward. To gain entry to Helya's holdings, they were going to need to cross the perilous Maw of Souls on the dread ship Naglfar, a ship which ferried the souls of the damned to Helheim. So, champions did that dungeon, facing Helya at the end of it, though not completely defeating her because she still needed to be a raid boss later. But her and her tentacles had done quite a bit of damage to the ship, so I guess we now had to find a different way to Helheim. Fortunately, Odin then provided that way. calling all champions to come on down and do a trial of valor. Prove your worth, and I'll grant you access to Helheim. But really, Odin and his Valor Jar were trapped in the Halls of Valor, bound by Helge's ancient curse. So ultimately, he just wanted her dead so that curse could be lifted. But we still got what we wanted, so who cares? Heroes of the Horde and Alliance answered the call, besting Odin in combat. He then granted the champions access to Helheim, as promised. So, they fought their way through all of the other raid bosses, and at the end, they fought Helge and took her ass. She then relinquished Illidan's soul, which the heroes captured within Illidari soul prison, and with her final breath, she cursed Odin's name. But there was only malice in her words, not magic. So ultimately, the curse she placed long ago on the Halls of Valor disappeared, freeing Odin and his Valor Jar from their prison. Which might sound like a nice happy ending, but to be fair, Odin is actually a bit of a dick. Anywho, with Illidan's soul now in our possession, we just needed to actually find Illidan's body. So both factions' super awesome intelligence gatherers got to work, and quickly discovered that Gul'dan was holed up in the Nighthold in Surama, planning to use the powers of the Nightwell to complete his Sargeras soul-summoning ritual. Unfortunately, with Elisandar on the side of the baddies, Surama was absolutely full of demons and hostile Nightborn. Getting through those defences to even reach the raid would require an army. Good news! Khadgar discovered a magically encrypted message from former First Arcanist Thalyssera, requesting aid in taking back her city. So, both Horde and Alliance champions head on out again. After finding Thalyssera, the heroes assisted her in assembling other exiled Nightborn into a Nightfallen rebellion. But there was a bit of a problem. Separated from the juicy goodness of the Nightwell, these exiled Nightborn were a little bit of a liability, suffering withdrawal and gradually wasting away into shriveled feral raisins, known as the Withered. That would probably get in the way of them being a capable army, so that issue needed to be solved first. After a bit of investigating, a solution was found, with heroes discovering an Arkandor seed deep within the ruins of Shalaran. Thalyssera ordered this seed planted, and then a bunch of time/reputation-gated weeks passed, until eventually a full tree appeared, providing the exiled Nightborn with a fruit which reversed their withering and cured them of their substance abuse issues. Also, integral to Thalyssera's plans, was Chief Telemancer Oculeth, a master of portal magic. With his expertise, an entire network of portals in and out of the main city were created, allowing the Nightfallen to slowly start to turn the denizens against their leader and seed rebellion from within. In order to achieve that, they intercepted Elisandar's provisions of Arkwine and started to distribute that themselves. They secured a seat on the Grand Magistrix's inner council for Lineth Linastra, a rebel sympathizer, and they assisted Arcanist Valtoire in obtaining a map of Suramar's ley lines from the Archway. And alongside all of those things, champions did a bunch of world quests and assassinated some high-value targets like Melandrus, Thalyssera's betrayer, as well. Obviously these things did not go unnoticed though. In an act of cruelty and desperation, Elisandar ordered demons and Nightborn followers to march into a particular district of the city, known for its rebel activity, the Waning Crescent, and they went ahead and slaughtered nearly every civilian there. Also, on her orders, random civilians around the entire city were being taken against their will, with their souls being siphoned to power the Legion. This, as you would expect, backfired massively on her. The people of the city had enough, and the streets erupted into violence. 'Twas time to do the raid. Khadgar put out the call, a call which was answered by specifically elves. Night elves, led by Tyrande Whisperwind, high elves, led by Verisa Windrunner, and blood elves, led by Lady Liadrin. Those combined forces marched, in all their glory, on the city, and were immediately caught in a massive time-lock enchantment cast by Elisandar. Khadgar, Tyrande, Verisa and Liadrin managed to escape, but the large army they'd assembled was now unavailable. Back to the drawing board. Lineth Linastra, a rebel sympathizer, then provided a plan B for us. She discovered a breach in the Sanctum of Order, which was a slightly less direct access point into the raid. So we went ahead and cleared the way to that, also working on freeing the big army trapped in a time lock at some point, with the Horde getting credit for the Archway dungeon, and Alliance getting credit for the Court of Stars dungeon, so those things just randomly slot in there, I guess. Inside the raid, champions dispatched Elisandar's most loyal lieutenants and captains before reaching the Night Spire, where the Grand Magistrix herself was waiting. They slapped her silly for a bit, and then moved on to the final battle of the raid, Gul'dan, who was now performing his fan-fiction ritual of putting Sargeras inside Illidan. Ooh. Unfortunately, the Warlock had locked himself inside the Eye of Aman'Thul, so champions had to fight against his demonic lieutenants for a bit instead. But eventually, after we'd beaten those assholes, Gul'dan had no choice but to face us himself. At which point, we kicked him in the dick. Using the Light's Heart artifact, Khadgar then reunited Illidan's soul with his body, and in an instant, the Demon Hunter was reborn. His first act was to utterly annihilate Gul'dan, with a bit of poetic justice. He infused the Warlock with raw fel magic, and the bloke exploded in exactly the same way that King Varian had been killed. And Illidan also crushed Gul'dan's skull in his hands, which was also very symbolic. And with that, the Legion were dealt a massive blow. They'd lost Gul'dan, they'd lost Illidan's body, and they'd lost a Pillar of Creation as well, with Khadgar teleporting the Eye of Aman'Thul back to Dalaran to complete our collection of those things. Also in the aftermath of that raid, the Lysera stepped up to lead Suramar, alongside her Nightfallen Rebellion, bringing about a new era for the Nightborn. One without the influence of the Nightwell, which was now kinda useless anyway, because it didn't have the Eye of Aman'Thul to stabilise it anymore. Some people did want to try and find a way to preserve the Nightwell, but the Lysera felt that it should fade away, along with the Nightborn's troubled past. It was time to move forward, free of their magical addiction, thanks to the Fruit of the Arkandor. Next up, Legionfall, which was probably the least good part of Legion as an expansion. The filler patch. With Gul'dan's death, we were now in a good position to retake the Broken Shore. That was the next logical step, if we were to get inside the Tomb of Sargeras and use the Pillars of Creation to close the Legion's portal. And we were now stronger and wiser than we had been when we lost miserably there the last time, so off we went, and spent the next 11 weeks doing real bare-bones, mundane, grindy content to achieve that. Illidan and a small contingent did the Cathedral of Eternal Night dungeon, armed with the Aegis of Agramar, defeating Mephistroth, a Legion Dreadlord, and encountering an echo of Aegwynn, and she instructed us to place the Aegis there, in the upper reaches of the tomb, where its energies could be channeled best. Meanwhile, below them, Khadgar and a bunch of champions were battling their way through the foundations of the tomb, against a bunch of Naga minions of Queen Ashara, eventually arriving at the Abyssal Throne and placing the Tidestone. They then continued on, defeating Kil'jaeden's Demonic Inquisition and placing the Hammer of Khaz'goroth in the Conclave of Torment. And a bunch more boss fights happened until they placed the Tears of Elune in the Befouled Sanctum, leaving only the Eye of Aman'Thul to be placed in a random place within the tomb for some reason. Aegwynn opened a secret path for the heroes, allowing them to bring peace to the corrupted Maiden of Vigilance, whom Aegwynn had empowered to guard the tomb long ago. And with the Maiden's defeat, they gained access to the Chamber Beyond, a chamber which contained the dead husk of Sargeras' last avatar. Kil'jaeden empowered that avatar anew, albeit without Sargeras' soul inside, so it wasn't quite as powerful as it could have been. And the heroes went ahead and took that thing's ass as well. Kil'jaeden, witnessing the avatar's defeat, buggered off through a portal, and the heroes gave chase, arriving atop a mighty dimensional vessel within the twisting nether. And there, they faced the Deceiver himself, and took his ass, or so. But, even in defeat, Kil'jaeden had one final trick to play. He'd set his vessel on a crash course with the planet Argus. All would perish in the inevitable collision. However, Illidan went ahead and revealed that he had the Sargerite Keystone, and had a little trick of his own up his sleeve. He opened a massive rift in the fabric of the universe, one through which Azeroth could be seen, and Khadgar then teleported everyone to relative safety. But almost everyone was then a little bit shocked to see that the rift hadn't closed behind them. Argus now hung in the sky, dangerously close to our planet. So we now had two choices: travel to Argus from our planet and strike, or sit around waiting for them to come and kill us all. Thanks, Illidan. Fortunately, Prophet Velen and his Draenei had been working on a new dimensional vessel of their own anyway, the Vindicar. So, all of Azeroth's greatest and mightiest jumped on that ship, and off we went. However, as we made the short trip, tensions between Velen and Illidan mounted. The Prophet was still reeling from all the losses at the Exodar, and was struggling with the return to his homeworld after all this time. And Illidan kinda mocked the bloke, chiding him for running away from the fight all those thousands of years ago. But Velen kept his anger in check. He still had faith in the light, and the Prime Naru Zira. The heroes arrived at Argus to see Zira's big old ship, the Xenadar, appear in the sky to welcome them, but the Legion immediately shot it down with a super weapon. Not the best thing to witness the moment we arrived, but Velen quickly sent a vanguard to destroy the super weapon before it could recharge and shoot us down as well. So, heroes went ahead and did that, discovering the super weapon was actually attached to a much larger fell beast. This whole planet was probably going to be full of just bloody awful terrifying things. After taking that giant thing's ass, Illidan really stressed that the Legion will probably launch a counterattack very quickly, and Velen suggested that we maybe make friends with some local peeps. The Chronicle, also known as the Broken. Eridar who had been twisted over the millennia from exposure to the Legion's fell magic. We had actually rescued a few of them on the way to the super weapon. Their allegiance was unknown, but it was better than just standing around fiddling with our balls. So, Velen and the champions went ahead and pursued the Chronicle that we'd rescued back to their little hovel thing. There, they met Chieftain Hatun and his followers, and they absolutely hated Velen. As far as they were concerned, he had abandoned them. But before tensions could explode, High Exarch Turalian then arrived, explaining that survivors of the crashed Xenadar were holding their ground and desperate for reinforcements. So, everybody then head back to the Vindicar, bumping into Illyria on the way and bringing her with us too. At the Vindicar, Illyria and Turalian reunited with their son Arator, as well as Illyria's sister Varisa, and they all had a little moment together before remembering that now was not the time for emotions, because the Xenadar and the survivors and stuff. Soon enough, we reached the Xenadar, battling our way through Legion forces to secure a path inside, and there we found Zira. She had been weakened somewhat since sending her heart to Azeroth, but she had survived the crash, so we rescued her, escorting the Naru to the safety of the Vindicar. And we gave her heart back as well, so she regained her full power. To be honest, rather than sit here and describe one of the coolest cutscenes from the game ever, I'll just play the bloody thing.
We are blessed to be in your presence once more, Zira.
Turalian, you have found the Chosen One. Illidan, from birth, the light in your eyes held such promise for the future.
I sacrificed that birthright long ago.
Do you not wish to reclaim what was lost? To be whole again?
The Legion's end is all I seek.
My child, you've given so much for so little. Your true potential, your redemption, lies before you. Let go of your shattered form and embrace the light's power.
I've traded my freedom for power before.
The prophecy must be fulfilled. Your old life has passed. The light will forge you a new one.
It is not yours to take.
The light will heal your scars.
I am my scars.
The light is your destiny.
My destiny is my own. You've doomed us all, betrayer! blinded you. There can be no chosen one. Only we can save ourselves.
Meanwhile, Anduin was moping around Stormwind crying about his dead dad. And back to Argus. The heroes of the Horde and Alliance were then summoned by an unlikely source. Magni Bronzebeard, Speaker of Azeroth, who had also travelled to Argus, apparently. He'd heard the voice of Argus's world soul calling out to him, granting him a vision of Sargeras in his stronghold at the heart of the planet. In the vision, the fallen titan spoke with a corrupted Agramar, which was not great news. Agramar served the Legion. Fantastic. But Magni also revealed some much more helpful and less terrifying information. Antorus, the Burning Throne, was more than just a fortress for the Legion. 'Twas an engine. Harvesting the power of the world souls will allow the demons to endlessly reincarnate. If Antorus was destroyed, the Legion's infinite army would stop being infinite. So, everybody got to work on preparing for this final assault, gathering valuable resources and securing territory on Argus and stuff. Even if things were a little bit tense between Turalyon and Illidan now. However, the heroes of Azeroth were still going to need a bit more of an edge before the raid, and Velen provided just that. He, Kil'jaeden and Archimonde had each held a piece of a magical crown, back in the good old days, known as the Crown of the Triumvirate. Whilst the individual pieces were kinda useless, together they held immense power. Velen still carried his piece, the Eye of Prophecy, but the Sigil of Awakening and the Crest of Knowledge were somewhere else. Who knows? Probably somewhere in the floating city of Eridath, which was once the Jewel of Argus. So, champions head there, undergoing some more stupid trials to obtain the Sigil of Awakening. But Legion forces led by Taugath had become aware of the hero's presence and showed up to make things more difficult. Both the champions and Velen defeated Taugath, and in doing so, learned the location of the third piece of the crown, the Crest of Knowledge, which was at the seat of the Triumvirate, alongside the remains of Lura, yet another Naru. And as has been the case many times before, Naru have a habit of becoming beacons of void energy when they die, so gonna have to fight another one of those things. However, this time we had an Illyria Windrunner with us. Touched by the void, she was uniquely suited to this task. So, champions and Illyria ventured to this final dungeon. The only things worth mentioning are Locust Walker was also in the dungeon, being drawn to Lura's void energy. Illyria consumed said void energy at the end of the dungeon, entering a void state herself, and then she buggered off with Locust Walker, with him intending to help her gain control of her new form. And we returned to the Vindicar. With the crown of the Triumvirate whole again, Grand Artificer Ramul used it to enhance the main cannon of the vessel, and we then used that cannon to blast an opening into the once impenetrable Antorus, an opening which the Army of the Light and the Defenders of Azeroth could easily exploit. And exploit it we did. The armies of Azeroth and the Light clashed with the many horrors pouring out of Light's breach, breaking through so that they could delve deeper into the planet itself, and very quickly learned the full scale of Sargeras' plans. Although the Titans had fallen before him long ago, their essences had survived, and over time, Sargeras had hunted down and captured each of them, apart from Aenar, the Lifebinder, who had somehow eluded him. However, after defeating one particular boss of the Antorus raid, the Legion's Portal Keeper, champions discovered a path to Elenaria, the secret refuge of Aenar, which kinda makes you wonder how Sargeras never found her, but okay. Waves of Legion forces followed the champions into this refuge, so they defended the Titan's essence against that for a bit, and after their defeat, Aenar urged the heroes on, which they were going to do anyway, Aenar, so shut up. After that, we faced a Dreadlord that we had not seen since the dark days of the Lich King, Varamathras, as well as the Coven of Shivara, who were responsible for warping the fallen Titans into Sargeras' Dark Pantheon. Upon defeating them, Magni stayed behind to comfort the freed Titan essences, who were a little bit dazed and confused from eons of torture. But there was still one Titan left that remained under Sargeras' sway. At the seat of the Pantheon, the very cradle of creation, the heroes fought against Agramar. Wielding his burning blade Tayshalach, he stood guard over the tormented world soul of Argus. Illidan, Velen, Turalyon, and Illyria, along with the champions of Horde and Alliance, gave it everything they had to ultimately subdue Agramar long enough for his essence to be freed. And then, he stood aside, allowing us to proceed. The path to Argus was clear. All of the Pantheon took their places, channeling what little strength they had into the World Soul in an attempt to sever Sargeras' link to it. But the Dark Titan then ordered the World Soul of Argus to rise. So it did, immediately knocking the Titans back and forming into Argus the Unmaker. And the champions took its ass, bolstered by the cosmic strength of the Pantheon, and also dying halfway through the fight, but that was actually part of it, so it's fine. And with that, the Legion's war engine was deactivated. Sargeras was now vulnerable for the first time, pretty much ever, and the Titans intended to seize this chance to bring their wayward brother to justice, whilst we decided it was time to go home or something. However, Illidan then bade Velen farewell because he intended to stay behind and make sure that Sargeras did not leave his prison. And we were like, alright, cool, see ya. Jumped in the Vindicar and left, as if we'd left the oven on or something. As we head back towards Azeroth and the rift joining the two worlds began to close, giant fiery Sargeras. He sensed the impending imprisonment at the hands of the Pantheon, so he scorched earthed it, summoning a massive sword which he proceeded to drive into our planet, just before being dragged off to the seat of the Pantheon where he would be bound and contained. And we watched that unfold helplessly with sheer terror on our faces. As soon as we landed back on Azeroth, Magni Bronzebeard heard the World Soul's cries and travelled to Silithus. The gigantic sword stuck in the planet had obviously done some damage, but it was also imbued with fel energies, and this corruption was slowly poisoning the Ancient Titan. But Magni and Khadgar then had a little chat and formed a plan, calling upon all of the heroes to head to the site of the wound immediately. There, they revealed that a source of great power would be needed to drain the sword of its corruption and contain the fel energy. And that source of great power was none other than the legendary artifact weapons that we'd all been carrying around for this entire expansion. From the Doomhammer to the Ashbringer, the Scythe of Elune to the Twin Blades of the Deceiver, and stuff. So, the champions did as they were told, raising their artifact weapons high, and poof, all was right in the world. I mean, there was still some work to be done. Massive sword stuck in the ground, for example. But if we all just pretend that doesn't exist, then it'll go away. Surely.